What is a 100% legal move in a game or sport that is frowned upon and viewed as a dong move? In the ladies UFC I heard they don't punch each other in the boob because the fight would turn into non-stop tit destruction. It's not illegal, but I heard that crap hurts enough to discourage everyone involved from doing it. In water polo there is no foul for hits below the water. You can squeeze all the dong you can get away with and the refs will penalize them for retaliating. Or you can break people's fingers without breaking the rules if you aren't into the dong stuff. The literal interpretation of a dong move. In paintball there is a move called a dead man's walk. Basically, without getting shot, you stand up from behind your bunker, act dejected as if you were eliminated. You can't actually call hit, out, put your hand or your gun in the air though, that would result in you being actually eliminated, and walk down the sideline, being careful not to walk out of bounds. After you get behind your opponent's team, you shoot them in the back. I've seen it pulled off in regional tournaments. Balls of steel on those guys. It's basically a pastime of most people to shoot people who are waking off an extra time or two. Bonus bullying. Just for funsies. So you have to avoid that too. I think the national leagues have banned it now, and it doesn't really lend itself very well to X-ball anyway. The dead boxes team pits are usually behind your team instead of the other team. But man, I've seen some teams get wrecked by it back in the day. In professional cycling, it's very frowned upon for a rider to attack on the final stage of certain tours. For example, attacking on the Champs-Élysées on the final day of the Tour de France. It's generally accepted that the person who is in the lead on the second to last day has won the tour, and the final day is just a celebration victory lap of sorts where everyone just takes it easy and drinks beer wine together while they ride, with the exception of the sprinters, who will still contest the stage to get more points. Row. In rowing in the UK, the start line calls our attention. Go. A few years ago the Oxford Brookes University first 8 got into the habit of keeping their oars slightly away from the oarlocks while coming forward to start. On the call of attention, they would all slam the blades out against the oarlocks in unison, causing a loud bang. The loud bang would either cause ill-disciplined opponents to false start, or to be so distracted they would miss the start entirely. There was no specific rule against this at the time, but the umpires started going after them for unsportsmanlike conduct, so they gave it up after a couple of seasons. Cannon Rush, Adept Rush, Proxy Oracle, DT Rush, Warp Prism Rush into the main base, TL, DR, Frick Protoss. Note, I play Protoss. In snooker, the player Ronnie O'Sullivan was publicly criticized and derided by his fellow professionals for switching hands mid-game and playing left-handed. It was viewed as an enormous sign of disrespect to an opponent he was already comfortably beating. He is in fact fully ambidextrous and since then has played fluently left or right-handed depending on which is positionally easier for the shot. Now it's just viewed as an example of his exceptional skill and commitment to the game, having trained with both hands to championship winning standard. But the first time he did it, it was really damaging to his profile. In tennis there are lots of ways to subvert the game without necessarily breaking any rules. You are allowed a certain number of toilet breaks and treatment breaks with a medic trainer. You are also, at some tournaments, allowed a limited number of video replay challenges to calls you think were incorrect. There's also no set time limit to how quickly you are required to serve to begin contesting a point. All of these things can be, and often are, very easily manipulated to disrupt an opponent's rhythm. An umpire can intervene, issue warnings, and ultimately disqualify someone if they have reason to believe they are doing this deliberately, such as taking a toilet break right before an opponent is due to serve for the match, or repeatedly challenging a perfectly legal shot to waste time and frustrate someone. But that itself is another disruption to the rhythm of play. The damage is already done, regardless, and as long as one doesn't get disqualified, it's something that can be taken advantage of. Coming into a new game of Risk with secret or unspoken alliances, table talk and making any kind of alliance during the game is 100% fine. Maybe this isn't an issue for most groups, but I played with the same 5 friends every weekend for about a year, and 2 of them often worked our strategies hours before and would sometimes admit it after one of them won. We eventually got sick of it. The other 3 and myself all focused on destroying them first. After 2 weekends of that, they stopped wanting to play. Apparently they cared more about winning a board game than having fun playing games with friends. That's why I find it extremely frustrating to play Risk with certain people, like couples that are just automatically on a team, or a veteran player coaching a younger player. If anyone at the table is playing for second place, then the game just isn't fun. Weirdly, back in the early days of EverQuest, people used to get offended if you inspected them without asking first. It's literally just right-clicking on a dude to look at his gear. You'd get people asking if they could inspect you, or moving away from you in a huff if you inspected them without permission. In the UFC we are allowed to foot stomp, but it very rarely changes the fight or does real damage, but it will mess up your toes. Definitely a dong move. Don't forget about the free accidental eye pokes. In Sid Meier's Civilization multiplayer, there's a strategy that involves not settling and moving your initial settler 20 tiles or so in order to plonk your capital right next to someone else's. You obviously go on a so this is for early. We're talking Stone Age, war and full tilt unit production and attempt to take someone by surprise. It is however usually futile because you end up 10-15 turns or more behind the target and still have to research archery before you can effectively attack a capital. Meanwhile they're building units and can repel you easily, especially if on a hill. It's considered a dong move because you instantly make yourself irrelevant and your opponent gets bogged down in a pointless war. Neither of you can win the game against the untouched opponent, so it's a futile gambit that removes 2 players from contention by turn 15 in a 300 turn game. All the competitive groups consider this not playing to win. The better way to do this is be the Huns and send out a bunch of warriors to look for ruins until you get one to upgrade into a battering ram, and then you just solo their capital. Baseball. Bunting when the pitcher is throwing a no-hitter. Stealing a base when winning by a lot. Staring too long at a home run. I think it's a dong move in Scrabble to challenge an actual English word because it's not an official Scrabble word. I get that it's a thing to memorize the dictionary for all the weird combinations, but as a casual player, it's hard to know that A is valid and U is not. Playing Scrabble with people that know the official Scrabble dictionary by heart is one of the least fun things in the universe to do. In mixed martial arts, it's legal to stomp on someone's knees. People consider this a B move because it can frick up someone's knees. People still do it regularly. It's legal to attack your opponent as soon as the bell rings, and it's looked down upon as a dong move to do so when your opponent is trying to touch gloves, or when the ref doesn't notice an eye poke or groin shot. In the old Madden games, using Michael Vick as your QB and setting up long pass plays just to run with Vick, faster than every other player. At least it was fun, and frankly, defendable. Run the corner blitz. Shawn Alexander up the middle, though. Boring as frick. And I had a friend that would just run up the middle with him for 3-5 yards every play. In Dungeons and Dragons there is a strategy known as the Peasant Railgun. Basically, according to the technicalities of the rules, passing an item to an ally is a swift action, and will be done at the end of a 6-second round. This also applies to passing an item down a line of people. So if you hire enough peasants, and have them stand in a line, and pass a 10-foot pole from one end to the other, it will only take 6 seconds. So if you get like 2,000 peasants standing 5 feet apart, for a total distance of 10,000 feet, and then have them pass a 10-foot pole along the line, it will only take 6 seconds. At the end of the line the pole will have to be going at around 6,818 miles an hour. This is fast enough to kill most enemies and structures in physics. Most DMs will not allow the Peasant Railgun. In Monopoly, the act of suggesting to your friends that you should play a game of Monopoly is a pretty dong move. Once went round to a couple's house and we decided to play Monopoly. We didn't even start the game and they'd fallen out over what piece they were going to use. Monopoly destroys lives. The National Hockey League has done a great job of outlawing formerly legal plays as soon as they become dickish. You only get one timeout in ice hockey. but you can make as many goaltender substitutions as possible. So, Coach Mike Keenan would switch his goalie several times in the final minutes of close games to give his guys a breather. Now, there's a time limit on goalie warm-ups. When there is a penalty, play continues until the guilty team touches the puck. The exception being for too many men on the ice. That's because the late great Roger Nielsen once put his entire team on the ice at the end of a tight game, with strict instructions not to touch the puck. How about the Shawn Avery rule? He was known for causing trouble on the ice and off, but his greatest moment was when he stood in front of the defending goalie and rapidly waved his hands and stick in front of his face. The goalie, Martin Browder, one of the greatest ever, went full on tilt. And after a solid minute of this, Avery scored to really cap it off. This was illegalized literally the following night. It also works when the league dickifies a sportsman play. While there's fighting in hockey, the goons are quite the gentlemen, and will often remove their helmets before they square off so the other guy won't accidentally break his hand. The NHL starting suspending players who remove their own helmet to cut down on fighting. The solution? The fighters agreed to remove each other's helmets before they start punching one another. Holding onto a Q, V, Z, or any difficult letter in words with friends and swapping them when there are few tiles remaining so your opponent is stuck with them. I'm not sure if it is allowed in Scrabble. That is brilliant, and I am using that. In Settlers of Catan, there is a card called Monopoly, which enables the player to name one of the 5 total resource cards, and all other players must give that player their resource cards that match the one he named. It is a dong move to have a bunch of one resource traded to other players, oftentimes at favorable terms just to get it out of your hand, and then monopoly that resource back to your hand. To be fair, almost every play in Catan is frowned upon by others during the game. In cricket, as the bowler is on their run up to bowl, the batsman not facing will begin advancing down the pitch to shorten the distance they will have to run if they get the chance, called backing up. If they go too far and are outside of their crease before the bowler bowls, then the bowler can, by the written rules, run them out. This is, however, seen as extremely unsporting, unless the bowler has warned, or had the umpire warn, the batsman first. In organized competitive Team Fortress 2, 6v6 mode, the most popular gamma mode is 5CP, where each team has to capture a middle point, capture the enemy's second point, and then capture the enemy's final point. Then it starts over again. Whoever wins 5 rounds of the game wins. But if you have an advantage, say, you're winning 2-1, and you capture the middle point and the second point, then legally you can just sit on second and wait for the timer to end. The enemy can't do anything about it because they're holding last, and it's nearly impossible to push out of last without an advantage. Usually this advantage is gained when the attackers fail to take last, lose players, and the defenders can push out killing everyone they catch. But if the attackers instead park the bus and just sit on second without losing any player numbers, then they can theoretically win the game by running the time so low that the enemy will have no chance of pushing all the way to the other last. This is considered a hugely dong move in the community, because it brings the game to a halt where literally nothing happens for 5, 10, 15 plus minutes. There are factors like second halves, or needing more rounds to make playoffs, but generally if you're facing a team that has a real chance of beating you, or maybe you're only in the lead by luck, then parking the bus becomes a real option. It's considered courtesy for the attackers to actively try and push, and most of the time people won't park. But at higher level play it's a huge issue because teams need wins to move up and they'll use any tactic they can to. This makes it extremely boring to watch on live streams and cast, which is what esports thrive off of. The entire gamma mode is considered flawed because of this issue, but nobody's tried to really fix the issue. In sheepdog trials, entering your super smart pig who can sweetly persuade the sheep to do what needs done. That'll do, dong. American football, a defense that plays hard on a QB kneel. Most thought Greg Schiano was a dong when he got his Bucks D to do it. There's a move in MMA called the Oblique Kick, which is basically a side kick aimed at the knee. Totally legal but frowned upon for its propensity to damage the knee. See John Jones vs. Rampage Jackson for an effective use of it. Rampage later complained that Jones permanently damaged his knee from repeated oblique kicks. Magic: The Gathering related post. At pre-release events, the rules enforcement level is super chill. Pre-releases are an opportunity for players to get acquainted with upcoming new cards and have fun. It's acceptable for players to ask for slight do-overs. In fact, there's a joke that pre-releases are rel bouncy house, rules enforcement level bouncy house, compared to competitive rel. For example, let's say you wanted to cast multiple spells in your hand. By the time you're about to cast your last spell, you realize you've tapped your mana incorrectly. You technically can produce all the mana necessary, cast all the spells, you just happen to use your lands in the wrong order. At Grand Prix events, this crap wouldn't fly. At that level of competition, you should have practiced enough and have enough game awareness to sequence mana correctly. By the time you reach the last spell, you've already passed priority and altered the game state. At Rel Bouncy House, who gives a frick? Big prizes aren't on the line and it's an event for people to have fun. Lo and behold, some people treat pre-releases like the dang Pro Tour. I've seen players throw hissy fits over newer players making honest mistakes. This is exacerbated by the fact that everyone is literally playing with these new cards with new mechanics for the first time. Mistakes will happen. The player complaining is technically right, but is also being a humongous jerk about it. Most of the time, judges will rule in favor of players taking something back at pre-releases so long as it is immediately recognized. Of course, anyone wanting to rewind the game 2-3 turns back will be denied. If the game state hasn't been horrendously altered, judges are typically okay with it at pre-releases. At worst, they'll remind you to be vigilant and not repeat the mistake. Every now and then, you get a judge who isn't forgiving at pre-releases. That feels super bad even to watch. It never amounts to anything productive and can ruin a person's honest to goodness intended day of fun. TLDR, Magic players can be huge buttholes when it isn't warranted or wanted. Pulling a Hoban. In UGR you do matches, which are 3 duels, and in between duels you can swap cards with cards in your side deck. Basically the reserve bench. Now pulling a Hoban is having a gentleman's agreement with someone and saying you are both gonna swap out a certain card and then you just swap it out with the same card. So let's say you agree to both swap out Monster A, then you put one copy into your side deck of Monster A and add you take another copy from your side deck back into your deck. Now your opponent thinks you aren't playing the card and you haven't broken the agreement. But you are a dong, named after Patrick Hoban. Causing a housing shortage in Monopoly. Thing is, it's not just a loophole, it's the way the game is supposed to be played. For the uninformed, this is when you strive for a couple 3 monopolies early on, usually on the cheap throwaway properties, then buy 4 houses on each one, but not upgrading to a hotel so that nobody else can place houses. The number of physical houses in the game is limited on their expensive properties later in the game, and you slowly dissolve everyone else's accounts, along with their friendship. I was watching one of those world's fattest people shows the other day. There was one of those guys who weighed like a little ton, like had to be forklifted in and out of bed and crap. And I was like, if I was an NHL GM, I would totally find that guy and sign him as goalie. I mean, you literally just have to set him in front of the net and he's big enough that his body completely seals it off. Don't think there's a rule specifically banning it here and you could go completely undefeated until that changed. The problem is that the goalie can be any size they want, but the pads can only be a certain size. Not technically competitive, but in skateboarding it's proper etiquette that if you see someone struggling to do a trick, don't do that trick right in front of them, you butthole. When you're playing Mario Kart 64 on Royal Raceway and you use the lightning bolt as a player is driving up to the boost over the river. So I used to play Dungeons and Dragons with a group of people I didn't really like. I created a character I called the Pawnbroker. He was a bard, with 18 charisma and essentially dog shit for every other stat. I put literally all of my skill points into persuasion and appraisal. I couldn't really do anything to help in combat, and whenever we found anything even remotely of value, I would appraise it, and if it was useful or valuable I would persuade my teammates that it was worthless. It worked every single time, and for those of you who never played D&D, you're not allowed to use your real world knowledge to influence in-game decisions. So the guys I was playing with were tearing their hair out because they literally had no way of countering this. Then one night I was an hour late for the game and I found out the pawnbroker tragically died in a shipwreck. Good times. That's not legal but dong move. That's just bad deeming. In Ultimate Frisbee, there is a concept of spirit of the game in which players are supposed to hold themselves accountable. As you can imagine, there are a lot of problems with that in competitive games. A player can call a travel on his opponent whenever he completes a pass, making him take the pass back. The only punishment for this is you are known as having bad spirit. So effectively there is no punishment in this towards the outcome of the game. TLDR, no refs in Ultimate Frisbee allows the rules to be abused. Along a similar vein, some people are complete buttholes about foot placement rules and disc golf, to the point that they'll cry bloody murder if they think you're a few inches closer to the basket than you should be. In Pokemon video games, there's a Pokemon called Smeargle that can permanently copy another Pokemon's moves. Give it a focus sash so it can survive one hit. Keep it as low of a level as possible. Teach it Trick Room. Lower speed Pokemon go first. Spore, 100% chance to put a Pokemon to sleep. Endeavor, drops Pokemon to match current HP as caster, which is sub 30 health for a level 1 Smeargle, and Dragon Rage, deals a static 40 damage. Do the moves in this order for an EZ sweep. Seems like the same idea as Fear, the Rattata with Focus Sash, Endeavor and Quick Attack. In baseball, the batter can ask for a timeout by signaling to the ump. But if the ump doesn't signal to the pitcher, then technically the game is still in play because only the ump can call timeout. So if the batter calls timeout and has both feet in the batter's box but the ump doesn't call timeout, the pitcher can pitch while the batter isn't ready. Also the flip side of this, where as soon as a batter has both feet in the box the pitch can be delivered. You see this a lot in Little League, but Adult League softball pitchers do this crap all the time. 2. I shouldn't have to hold for time in fricking beer league. In football, if a player's injured and there's no prominent attack going on, it's usually a dong move to keep the ball in play and not put it out so they can get treatment. Also related to this, kicking the ball back to the other team after they put it out for you when they had possession. Nothing stops you from having a shot on net if you felt like it, and I've seen this done. Not at all sportsmanlike. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.